talk about, oh God, we're going to talk about cluelessness, and we're going to talk about how we can use this to hopefully prevent the failures that we're seeing right now, encourage success, encourage good things to happen, and most of all, just make this space stronger, make our products stronger, make our products more useful, make us more valuable, all of the good things that we try to do. And sometimes we're just really not good at doing them. So cluelessness is like an interesting concept, mostly because there's a lot of connotations with it. A common one is obviously like the dumb blonde who's just, in her own little world, naive and maybe a bit of arrogance. And then there's also like this kind of more philosophical, large-scale cluelessness, which is about like unpredictability and ignorance, and can we know things, and how do we know them? How do we not know them? How do we make decisions if we're clueless and everything's unpredictable? And this whole concept, right? And if we get to the point with these systems that we're building, if we get to the point where like the biggest problem we're having is that we can't predict the outcomes of these systems perfectly, and like we're failing to foresee unforeseeable futures, that'll be great. But right now, we're not there. Right now, we are making really common mistakes. We are not even looking for how our systems could fail. And then we're completely unprepared when they do fail. And then we're just like surprised and screwed and running around like chickens with our heads cut off, trying to figure out like how to fix this, how to not die. And so I'm going to start with a non-crypto example, actually, because this has stuck with me for like 5 years now. Basically, Eric Meyer, he writes a blog, he's written books, he speaks. He is like the master of CSS. I've been following him forever. And he has like a personal blog as well, and things kind of overlap a bit. And his daughter, who was like 5 years old, had cancer. And then she died, and it was freaking tragic. The whole thing was not fun. Like, it was just, you could just feel it in his blogs. And so you have this one tragedy, and then you have it compounded with this other tragedy where his daughter dies during the year, and then at the end of the year, Facebook comes and goes, "Hey, dude, how was your year? You want to remember it? Here's my daughter." And like, he wrote a little blog on it. You can go find it. It's called Inadvertent Algorithmic Cruelty. But just like the fact that he had to suffer this loss, he was grieving. And then to have Facebook put this like celebratory bullshit in front of his face, that was like almost more, that was cruel, right? And these are the things that happen when we are clueless. This is what happens when the designers and the developers at Facebook create this thing, and they're like, this is gonna be great. We're gonna show everyone their year in review. Nothing could go wrong. Dancing people, balloons, confetti, let's do it. And don't ever take a second to say, what could go wrong? So when we look at why these things happen, is it that they're just naive? Is it that they lack the insight? Is it totally unforeseeable? Is this just like not a predictable thing? Are they oblivious to something technical? Are they oblivious to something more human? Are they just dicks, right? But regardless of sort of what the cause is or what you want to call it, the reality is that the outcome is the same, right? At the end of the day, this thing happened. It created this negative, in this case, this negative feeling in this family. But, you know, when we're talking about crypto systems and DeFi, you can imagine that it's going to be greater than that, right? It's going to be, you know, the consequences of things going wrong can be really long lasting. They can trickle down in a number of ways. And, you know, people's livelihoods rely on their money. And if, you know, they lose all their money, it really can have dire effects. So regardless of what, you know, why these things happen, or what we want to call it, at the end of the day, we have to remember that the bad things still happened and it had effects on other people. And we want to try to prevent that as much as possible. Specifically, the things like, you know, every screw up that Facebook's ever had, some of the DeFi stuff, a lot of the issues with technology and new tech and the web and crypto, a lot of it is that we put way too much focus on sort of like this ideal user, or the best experience, or the happy paths. And we only think about those things. We don't ever look and be like, what could go wrong? What if they're not an ideal user? What if their daughter died this year? I think there's also a level of arrogance and like cockiness that comes when you can create things, when you can build things, when you have that talent and that skill. You get in this mindset like, we couldn't possibly build anything that like destroys people's lives, right? And then obviously, you know, just not considering the trade-offs. So if you're making a choice between, say, usability and security, if you don't really, truly, deeply consider them, you could have, yeah, bad things could happen. And so if we want bad things not to happen, if we don't want to fail, right? Because I would say that that experience, that interaction with Facebook's year in review, but also, you know, most of the interactions with DeFi products that have been hacked, I would call those failures. They are. And the easiest way to avoid failures is to anticipate them, because then you can start planning, you can protect against them, you can mitigate them, you can, you know, not freak out and panic when everything goes wrong, but you can address it with a calm soul, and make logical, rational decisions to mitigate, you know, further loss or the, you know, worse things happening than have already happened. And the other thing that can really, really, really help is just the amount of knowledge you have, whether it's like book knowledge, whether it's street smarts, whether it's experiences or interactions or conversations. You know, a lot of times we're scared to ask questions because we think that they're stupid, but in like those questions, any questions, but especially the stupid ones for some reason, they deeply increase your knowledge and decrease your ignorance. And if you get, you know, push out the ignorance, bring in the knowledge, that's going to put us in a better state. It's going to encourage success. It's going to limit the failures, etc. And, you know, some of the questions that I like to ask when I'm thinking about our products or just the space in general is like, are we doing something that actually empowers malicious actors? Are we doing something that encourages bad behavior? What are the unintended consequences of this thing, this product, this choice, this feature? What's the unintended consequence of like the language we use around the feature? And is there like, am I properly scoping this? So, you know, a perfect example is like the very first versions of MyCrypto, back then my Ether wallet. The very first versions, the scope was like, we're building this thing for super smart tech people who know what they're doing. And the choices we made were probably pretty good if only those types of people ever interacted with our product. But, you know, more than like the super smart tech people interact with our product. And so, you know, just because you answer the questions about with one assumption, if the underlying assumption changes, right? If the assumption changes from like super smart tech people to like people who are just like so cranked up on FOMO and are racing to get in, you know, your answers are going to change, right? So what are the unforeseen consequences what's unpredictable, what's predictable, you know, what do I intend to do is what I'm building, is how I'm talking about this feature, accomplishing my goals. And this is how I think about sort of all of the knowledge. This is how I think about the concept of knowledge, I guess. So top left, you have known knowns, right? This is like, I know something and I know that I know it. I operate with this stuff inside me all day, every day. Like I know now that we have a wide variety of users using our products, right? We have advanced power users, we have offline people, all the way down to the newest of new people. And so that's a good state to be in. Then we have the known unknowns. So like, I know that I don't know what's going to happen in the future regarding DeFi. I know that I don't know if we're going to see a bull run in the next 3 months that, you know, takes ETH to 10,000. You know, and so those things I still have with me. And even though I don't know what they are, I don't have the answer, they still impact how we make decisions. And it's a much better state than the lower right, which is the unknown unknowns, which is just the things that are completely outside your field of vision. You're not aware of them. You're not aware that you're not aware of them. It's complete and utter ignorance. These are the things that, like, you know, when something like happens and you hear about it for the first time, you don't go like, oh, let me fix that. You go, what? Like, where did that come from? That can't be our product. I didn't screw up. Like, you go into this very primal defense mode. Some people go into attack mode, right? Fight or flight. But regardless, like the unknowns are the most dangerous because you can't prepare for them. You can't mitigate them. You can't do anything. And the unknown unknowns are also like, you can know things that you didn't know yesterday by talking to people, having conversations, doing thought experiments, user research studies, like all of those things. And when we really zoom out and think about it, you know, all the conversation about knowledge and ignorance and unpredictability and cluelessness and all of these things are really, the point of talking about all of them is so that we can stop thinking that complex systems are knowable, right? We want to kind of take ourselves down a peg, reduce the cockiness just like a little bit, so that instead of, you know, walking into the new future that we're building with this attitude that like nothing I could build could ever have a negative effect on anyone, we walk into it saying, there are a lot of things that I don't know. There's a lot of things that I can't know. And most of all, the complexity of the system is really outside sort of what I can grasp, what I can predict. And so if you do that, you can approach problems, you can approach design just like a little bit differently. Because if you know that you don't know everything, the decisions you make are like, let's ask a security professional what to do. Let's put some sane limits, right? So like one that we have in MyCrypto is that if somebody somehow gets to the transaction receipt page and the gas price or the transaction fee, if the transaction fee is greater than the amount they're sending, or if the transaction fee is like $1,000, we put a little warning and we're like, hey, something might be wrong. You might want to check this out. And it's just like a good example of, you know, approach one would be like, nothing could ever go wrong. Our code is always perfect. Users are always perfect. Therefore, the transaction fee will never be an unexpected value. The reality is that that's never been true. So, you know, just giving them the insight, making those design choices will make everyone's life better. And you'll save someone, you know, that negative experience of like looking on Etherscan and realizing that you just sent, you know, like a spam token that's worth literally $0. You just sent that for like $10 in ETH. Like that's a painful experience. Okay, and so when we talk about complex systems, the system is Ethereum in our case. That's sort of the overarching system. That system interacts with a whole bunch of other systems like humans, and outside data like the weather or maybe a traditional stock price or whatever it is. And then there's subsystems built on Ethereum that interact with Ethereum, that interact with other things, that, you know, on and on and on and on and on. And this is what we talk about when we talk about complex systems. This is like an interoperable beast where there are so many technical things and so many human things, and they're all interwoven. And you cannot predict how the systems are going to interact. You can't predict every single combination of things. Perfect example is like, let's say that you build a system for trading that is as simple as possible. It's like just, you can trade ETH for ERC-20 tokens. Maybe you can only trade for like 5 of them. And you feel pretty confident that this system, you know, yes, something bad could happen. Yes, maybe it could be hacked, but for the most part, you're aware that the bad things that could happen is like, there's no liquidity and somebody could hack me and like those types of things. The scope is limited. You can understand it. But you forgot that someone might come along and change this ERC-20 token to an ERC-777 token. You didn't build ERC-777. You don't know what it is, but it works with your system. And therefore, all the things that you thought you knew, right? All the bad things, suddenly, like this thing came out of left field. What is an ERC-777? What were the negative consequences, right? So that's a very small example of how just the interoperability with one other thing can create sort of this cascading effect of bad, unexpected, undesirable things from happening. And then if we zoom out, it gets super fun because DeFi and the things that are being built right now, like we're building a system that is trying to make traditional finance, you know, more open, more verifiable, more trustless, more transparent, more decentralized, whatever, right? Like we're basically redoing this whole thing with new possibilities, new potentials. There's a lot of benefits, right? A ton of benefits. It could be amazing. But it's complex because you have the underlying, you have ETH, and then you have tokens, you have different types of tokens. Then you have the trading tokens that can be used with the derivatives platforms, which are getting the price via an oracle from this other system, and on and on and on. And so when you think about it, you're not just trying to figure out your system, say Uniswap, and the ERC-20 system, right? You got 2 there. And then you throw in the third, which is ERC-777. That's really limited compared to what is actually happening today, right? We're not talking about 1, 2 systems, 3 systems. We're talking about like, you know, a couple dozen systems at least. And there's gonna be more and more and more every day. And there's people involved, there's humans involved. They can be the builders or the traders or the hackers. They can be white hat hackers or black hat hackers. You can have the flash loans or the regular loans or, you know, any of these different things. You can have a trading platform that operates one way, maybe like a traditional market, right? Order matching. Or you could have basically the same system that's completely technically different under the hood, where you have a liquidity pool. And if you're like maybe over here standing in the corner with your system and you're super excited about it and you've done everything correctly with the security and on and on and on, you're totally great until it touches any one of these other things, and then you're screwed. And so when I think about this, I basically have just come to the conclusion that we'll never know everything, period, end of conversation. We will operate a lot in the unknown space. And therefore, we should be scared. And we should take a lot of steps to mitigate the loss, to reduce the risk. All of those things, we have to do them because we just don't know. We're just like walking around in a pit of fire. We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know how these things are going to collide. But there are things that you can do just at a high level, right? So like Compound whitelist tokens. They don't blacklist them, they whitelist them. Only these tokens are enabled. That's a perfect example of like just completely reducing a whole side of risk. And it's really important to remember that, like, you know, we get into the weeds on the technicals. We talk about the specs and the ERC-20s and the ERC-777s and derivatives and blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, everything that we build is for humans, right? We build things to benefit us, to add value to our lives, to add value to the lives of the people around us. We want the human condition to improve. And sometimes the things that we're building are not directly, you know, a one-to-one mapping of like, this got built and now my life is better. But everything, you know, in the whole wide world is built on top of each other, on and on and on. And it's actually really interesting to think about this. Like literally everything we do is to try to help better the human experience. And my favorite example of this is like Wally. Wally doesn't have human creators around anymore. He doesn't have a boss. He's not being given updates. Like there aren't even any humans on Earth at this point. And yet Wally still operates to benefit humans. That's so, like that, you know what I mean? Like we have to remember this. Because when we look at the risks, when we look at the dangers, when we look at what failure looks like, there's the technical failures, right? This interaction didn't go as planned and it created undesirable technical behavior over here, blah, blah, blah. But when we think about the humans and how we affect them, the scope is so much bigger, right? Like you're not, you know, something didn't just like go wrong. Like someone's day was ruined, month was ruined, year was ruined. Someone has to rebuild their entire financial livelihood, etc. And we have this sort of inherent conflict within crypto, right? I see this all the time. On the one hand, we say things like, if it doesn't perfectly and elegantly solve the entire problem to perfection, then we shouldn't even consider it. It's not worth the discussion because it's not going to be perfect. And a dude can walk in the door over here and you'll still be screwed. And then on the other hand, we have this like just running before we know how to walk mentality, which is like, yeah, that's a good point, but also we should just do it and see what happens because we won't know until we do it. We won't have any innovation if we don't do it. And it's really funny because like the same people say both of these things and they're really in direct conflict with each other. If we treated everything like, you know, it needs to be a perfect solution that, you know, catches all the edge cases, we literally wouldn't build anything. And you probably shouldn't even be in crypto, right? And as always, whenever you have conflicts like this, balance is the key. I just love this slide, sorry. You want to find the balance, right? So you want to innovate, you want to progress, you want to make amazing things that impact people beneficially, et cetera, et cetera. However, we want to be careful while we do so. We want to make sure that, like, you know, you have the year in review, it gives a lot of people a lot of happy feels, but hey, like it's Facebook, they know literally everything about us. They can probably figure out if they took the time to design an algorithm that determined whether or not they should show this year in review to any certain person, they could very easily figure out that like, hey, this guy had a rough year. We're just not going to show him his year in review. Or, you know what, if he goes directly to the page, you can see it, but we're not going to put it in his notifications, put it in his feed, literally confront him with it because we're not sure if this will create happy feels or sad feels, right? And that's what I'm talking about with balance, okay? We want to do things, we want to move forward, we want to experiment, we want to have fun, but we want to limit the impact and where that negativity goes and how bad that negativity is. Because if we don't, we're going to continue doing what we do today, which is literally like, this is the DeFi launch process. This is really silly. You build it, then someone with a brand recognition that you want, security reviews it, Or you just don't. You've seen that too. Just put on mainnet directly. Don't have a contingency plan. Don't put a pause button in. Yeah, and then you die. Duh. Like how, like what is the other outcome for that behavior? The alternative would be to be more mature about the decisions that we're making and start with like making a plan, having discussions, looking and seeing how previous people have screwed this up royally so that you don't make the same mistakes. You can do things like threat modeling. You can have a security review come in when you have like the initial spec. Then you can like iterate on it, and you can have an MVP, and you can try to break it yourself. You can try to hack it yourself. You can put it on testnet. You can have users QA it. You can have technical people QA it. You can fix it and adjust it and refactor it and re-architect it and refactor it again. You can have discussions about the refactoring. Those are always super fun for me. You can write tests for it. You could launch it on testnet. It's amazing how little we use the testnets. And then once you finally get to the mainnet, after doing all the things, right, all the documentation, all the audits, all of the threat modeling, all the contingency plans, once it gets to mainnet, have some limits. Just make sure that it'll never get to a point where it's like $100 million or even $20 million. Have a pause button. Have like a button that just like, all of the functions that used to exist, we're just going to get rid of those really quick, press pause. But we'll leave this one function available for users to withdraw their funds or withdraw their balance or whatever. And this is, people like to cite, the decentralization philosophy as the reason for not doing this. But the reality is that the value of decentralization is that, no one party can do bad things and steal from users, etc. Right? And so even if you're, worried about that, there's still ways to mitigate. Like there's literally still ways that you can mitigate that fear of centralization by ensuring that the operators and the admins can press pause and can press play, but that's it. And then giving the users in their decentralized way the ability to say withdraw even if it's in a pause state. Obviously, every system is different, but there's a lot of ways where when you launch something on mainnet, you can, not go full bore. Yeah, I started this talk like 3 hours ago. So in summation, when we think about where we are today and where we want to be tomorrow, there's sort of two modes of thinking. One is like sort of like in the weeds a bit, and I don't particularly like that. I like having those conversations, but a lot of times we do need to zoom out, but not too far, because on the other side of that spectrum, you have like the hashtag thought leaders on Twitter who give you these bite-sized nuggets, 200 characters, whatever it is now, of wisdom. And they're going to tell you exactly how the future will be, and it's going to be so optimistic and ideal and amazing. But in the middle somewhere is sort of the thought patterns that we want that will best lead to success. Because the goal here is to succeed in building all of the things that we want to build. The goal here is to benefit the human condition, to add value to all of our lives, to make our lives better. So if you're clueless, you cannot foresee, you cannot anticipate, you cannot plan for, you cannot mitigate anything that's bad, any failure states. And if you have enough failure states, enough incidents, you're not going to succeed. You're not going to benefit anyone. And you're also going to actually cause people real harm. On the flip side of that, if you have more knowledge, if you have more discussions, if you have diverse teams of people that have like a variety of age ranges and come from across the globe, and then you have conversations with everyone, right? If the support team talks to the design team, talks to the dev team, right? That's all of these things are knowledge. You can have outside consultants come in. You can have Twitter conversations. All of these things add value to you because when you are more knowledgeable, when you're less clueless, right? You have the best chance of success. It doesn't mean that you will succeed, but way, way, way better chance. And it also, and most importantly, reduces the chance that your failures will negatively impact other people in a tragic way that causes you to regret ever doing the things that you did in the first place. And that's what I want for DeFi. That's what I want for Ethereum. That's what I want for the financial future. I want people's lives to get better with the least amount of people being hurt. And when they do have pain, when they do hurt, when they open that short position when they shouldn't have, I want it to be as little as possible, right? We have to have pain in order to have pleasure, but we don't have to have all the pain. We can do little small doses. So baby steps, calm down. And that's all I have. Definitely check out beta.mycrypto.com. Give us feedback. We've got like tons of improvements coming out all the freaking time. I'm Taylor Monahan. You can find me on Twitter at MyCrypto or at Tavano with an underscore on the end. And yeah, thank you all.